You don't fear failure, you fear softness. You fear what happens when control slips, when you stop fixing, stop optimizing, stop hiding behind excellence. Because if you let go of the structure, what's left? You've built a life so refined it could be studied. Precision in your habits, efficiency in your emotions. You've become what the world trusts, the one who holds everything together. But inside, there's a silence, not peace, not stillness, a kind of spiritual drought you can't name. And the worst part is no one can see it but you, because you still perform. You show up, you achieve. You smile at the right moments, you check the boxes. And you do it all without ever once letting them see you bleed. They call it discipline. But what if it's disappearance? Carl Jung said, the persona is what one is not, but what oneself and others think one is. It's the mask you've worn for so long, it's fused to your skin. And the soul? It doesn't shout to be noticed. It just stops showing up, stops singing, stops sending you dreams. Until your life becomes a script you didn't write, performed by a self you don't recognize. This is how spiritual starvation works. It's not dramatic, it's gradual, it sounds like success. But it feels like absence. You still laugh, but you don't feel it, you still sleep. But you wake up tired, you still win. But the victories feel weightless. You used to think this was what strength meant, pushing through, holding steady, staying composed. But strength without soul is just armor. And armor rusts from the inside out. You've been running your life like a machine. But you were never meant to be optimized. You were meant to be felt. Maybe you've even convinced yourself that you're fine, that emotions are inefficiencies, that softness is dangerous. But here's the truth, what you've called high functioning might just be high-level dissociation. What you've labeled focus might be the only way you know how to avoid yourself, and now something's shifting. It starts in the silence between tasks, the moment the music ends, the instant after the accomplishment, when the applause fades and you feel nothing but the echo. Something in you knows this isn't living. And that voice, quiet, buried, almost forgotten, isn't weakness, it's your soul, and it's starving, not for success, not for mastery, but for meaning. The kind of meaning you can't plan, the kind you have to feel your way toward. But to feel, you'd have to stop hiding behind excellence. You'd have to be soft, exposed, human. And that's the thing you feared most all along. It starts subtly, like a breath you forget to take, like a room you no longer feel at home in. You don't break down in a blaze, you unravel in whispers. You complete the task, but it feels hollow. You sit in your car after the meeting, and instead of satisfaction, you feel nothing. But there's no crisis, no dramatic failure. Just a steady erosion of joy. A soft implosion behind a perfectly curated exterior. You think, maybe I'm just tired, maybe it's a phase. But days turn into weeks and the emptiness expands. You try to fix it, adjust the routine, optimize the schedule, double down on the structure that once made you feel safe. But the ache doesn't move. It lingers like a question you don't want to ask. A question like, is this all there is? Because the systems that once made you feel powerful now feel like cages. Your calendar feels like a confession. Every block of time neatly labeled, except for the part that still doesn't know how to breathe. There's a man in his 50s who once built algorithms to predict markets, but couldn't predict the day he'd find himself in a garden, kneeling next to a rose that wouldn't bloom, realizing he hadn't grieved his wife or himself. There's a woman who hasn't cried in over a decade, until one night she can't stop. Not for a reason, just because her soul finally got loud enough to break through the silence, and maybe there's you. Sitting in the dark at 1:13 a.m. A perfect day behind you, an endless list ahead of you, and a growing suspicion that you're disappearing inside your own performance. You tell yourself, I'm productive, I'm respected, I'm strong. But what if your strength has become your sedative? What if the perfection you've built is keeping you from the one thing you've never mastered, being real? Jung called it nigredo, the blackening. The necessary breakdown that makes space for the soul to return. And this numbness, this emotional static, this creeping sense that something's off, it's not failure, it's the invitation. You think you're falling apart, but you're actually falling through the structure, through the mask, through the illusion of control you've mistaken for life, and beneath it, something still breathes, still waits, still wants to live. You don't need more goals. You don't need a better routine. You need a reckoning. The moment where you stop saying, I'm fine, and finally admit, I'm hungry. And I don't know what for, but it's not this. That's not weakness. That's the start of remembering. The start of becoming whole. Because nothing cracks open the soul like the realization that you've been living a masterpiece of form with no pulse beneath it. And now you're starting to feel it again. The ache, the tremble, the part of you that isn't optimized but alive. That's the collapse, and it's sacred. It's a strange thing when the collapse you feared starts to feel like relief. Not because it's easy, because it's honest. You stop running and everything you've been avoiding catches up. Not like a tidal wave, more like a slow, steady return of gravity. The smile that never felt real. The routines that became rituals for surviving, not living. The relationships that praised your performance but never touched your truth. They all come knocking, and for the first time you don't pretend you're not home. You still go to work, still keep your calendar, still tell people you're just tired, but something has already broken beneath the surface. Not a breakdown, a breakthrough. A slow unlayering of the roles, the image, the identity you've worn so tightly it choked the pulse beneath it. You see it in small things, a favorite song that no longer moves you. A celebration that tastes like ash. A room in your house that feels like someone else decorated it. You wake up in a life that looks like yours, but feels like someone else's ghost. And this time you don't rush to fix it. This time you sit with it. Because some part of you knows the person you built was never allowed to rest. You realize what you've called strength was often self-abandonment in disguise. What you called focus was the fear of feeling anything too deeply. Carl Jung named this moment nigredo, the blackening. Not despair, not dysfunction, but the sacred dissolution of what is false. This is where the mask begins to melt, not in public, not dramatically, but in the silence of your own breath. In the quiet memory of a younger self who used to feel things more fully, love things more freely, and somehow disappeared under the weight of becoming enough. You think about that child sometimes, the one who laughed too loud, who cried at movies, who painted without wondering if it was good or... And for the first time in years, you don't push the memory away, you lean toward it. You find the photo in the drawer, not to reminisce, to return. You look into their eyes and silently ask for forgiveness. Not for failing, but for forgetting. This is not the end, it's the reckoning. Where the life that looked right is gently set down because it no longer feels true. You thought you needed to be better, but really you needed to come back. Back to breath, back to softness. Back to the soul you left waiting in the corner while you proved your worth to the world. The soul doesn't want your perfection, it wants your permission to be heard, to be held. To be here, and now you're listening. It doesn't feel like transformation, it feels like exhaustion. Not the kind sleep fixes. The kind that comes when you're done pretending. When you stop performing your own life and finally sit inside it. No edits, no filters. Just you, raw, unscripted, and unshot. And then the fire comes, not from outside, from within. It doesn't rage, it smolders. It peels away the lies you believed about what strength was. And suddenly you can't keep up the act. You cancel the meeting. You delete the perfect response. You let the unanswered email stay unanswered. You lie on the floor, not to collapse, but to listen. Because deep down, something ancient is moving. Something you locked away so long ago, you forgot it had a voice. This is the fire you were taught to fear. The one that doesn't burn you down, but burns you clean. The old beliefs start to fall, that competence equals safety, that vulnerability is weakness, that control is love. They fall like ash. And in their place is space. You remember the myth of Inanna, the goddess stripped of everything, her crown, her power, her certainty, as she descends into the underworld. Gate by gate, layer by layer, until nothing is left but truth. This is your descent. And the beauty of it is, you didn't fall. You walked, you chose this. Because something in you finally knew you couldn't carry the mask one more step. It's not about fixing anything anymore, it's about facing it. Letting the fire touch the parts you protected. The ache, the tenderness, the longing. And instead of shrinking, you stay. You cry, you breathe. You do nothing heroic except allow yourself to be human. You were never meant to be a monument. You were meant to be a garden. Not symmetrical, but alive. Let it all burn, the image, the ambition without intimacy, the pride that kept you untouched. And when it's over, you won't be ashes, you'll be light. The kind of light that doesn't need to shine for others. The kind that just is. You sit on the floor in the stillness after the storm and take your first unguarded breath. Not for performance, not for preparation, just to breathe, and it feels terrifying and holy. Because for the first time, you're not managing life, you're in it. The fire was never your enemy, it was your initiation. And now that the mask is gone, you don't feel empty, you feel free. What rises after the fire isn't a phoenix. It's silence, not the silence of emptiness, the silence of presence. You wake. And for the first time in a long time, you don't rush to fill the moment. You just listen. The stillness doesn't scare you anymore. It steadies you. There is no grand revelation. No spotlight, just a subtle shift in gravity, as if your soul finally returned to its rightful place inside your chest. The mask is gone and nothing collapsed. The world didn't fall apart, only the performance did. You're not reborn, you're reclaimed. Carl Jung once said, wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries. Now you understand, wholeness isn't symmetry. It's contradiction held with love. The part of you that wants to disappear and the part of you that longs to be seen both have a place at your table now. The goal was never perfection, it was reunion. You return to your life, but everything feels different. Because you're no longer doing things to prove you're worthy of living them. You're not trying to impress anymore. You're not trying to escape. You're simply showing up. The productivity app stays closed. The to-do list becomes a suggestion, not a sentence. You let the sunlight touch your face before you check your phone. Not out of discipline, but reverence. And then it happens. You open that drawer. The one where you tucked away the photo of yourself you couldn't look at. And this time you don't flinch. You don't judge, you don't cringe. You smile, not because the photo is beautiful, but because you finally are not polished, but whole. You were never supposed to erase that child. You were meant to carry them with you. Not as a liability, but as a compass. You place the photo on your desk. Not for nostalgia, but for alignment. A visible reminder that the one who loved without condition, the one who felt everything deeply, the one who didn't need to earn rest, is welcome here now. Not someday, today. You are not a project to be managed. You are a soul that has returned to its body. You begin to move through your day differently. There's more breath in your breathing, more space between your thoughts. more grace in your slowness. You touch the doorknob and realize you're no longer bracing for the world, you're entering it. And the garden? The one you neglected in all your striving? It's blooming not because you forced it, but because you stopped standing over it with expectations. The rain came, not when you demanded, but when you aligned. Like the rainmaker in Jung's favorite story, you didn't make it happen. You simply stopped pretending you had to. This is the golden repair. Not a return to what was, but the birth of something more honest. Something sacred. You've been cracked open and filled with light. And it shows not in your resume. Not in your metrics, in your breath, your gaze, your stillness. The people around you may not know what changed, but they'll feel it. And maybe they'll want it too. Because the soul, once starved, doesn't just survive, it shines. This isn't an ending, it's a returning to breath, to softness. To the simple miracle of being here without the mask. You're not fixed. You're free. You don't need a new identity. You've outgrown the idea of becoming someone better. Now you're becoming someone real. You don't need to speak louder. You need to listen more deeply. To the part of you that doesn't want to win, it just wants to be seen. You sit with your own soul now, not as a stranger, but as an old friend. And in that stillness you realize this is what you were chasing all along. Not success, not clarity, not peace, but presence. Not the kind that performs, the kind that breathes. You used to believe you had to earn it through perfection, control, and composure. But here's the secret. You were always worthy. Even when you were hiding. Even when you were breaking. Even when your soul was in pieces, especially then. You think about the others now, the ones still performing. Still optimizing their way into emptiness. The ones who can't remember what joy feels like unless it's productive. The ones who look like you used to look, composed, efficient, starving. And maybe you'll say something, not loud, not forced. Just enough to crack the silence. Like, I know how that feels. Or maybe you'll leave a comment here, one word, one sentence. Maybe just, I'm starting to breathe again. And someone else, someone far away, but right next to you in spirit, will read that line and exhale for the first time all day. This is how we begin, not with answers, but with honesty, not with brilliance, but with presence, not by conquering life, but by letting it touch us, let it touch you, let it hold you. Let it welcome you home, because you don't need to be perfect to be sacred. You just need to stop pretending that you're not already whole.